Hi, my name's Gabrielle Leonore. I am an actor, writer. What else do I do? That's pretty much been my, I guess, like main focus. And then my day job is also, I'm a dually licensed massage therapist and esthetician as well. I also teach at Exceptional, which is a theater company for disabled adults. That's a lot of fun.
Who inspired you to want to get into this life of being creative?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And funny enough, I had a client ask me that today, so it's fresh in my head. I think I've come from how do I say this? Like a lineage of creative people. My aunt specifically, she pursued acting before I was born too. And my family's always had writers too and creative people, but then also we have doctors and people in medicine too. So I feel like there's that. I know my grandma was always taking us to plays and musicals and very focusing on art too. But yeah, no, it's funny. I can't think of a specific person. It's just something that I felt I was always drawn to or felt safe in, so to speak. And even growing up, I loved watching cartoons, movies, TV. So I felt I've always been drawn to that.
How does your autistic perspective influence your work?
That's a great question. I think, especially I think what I mentioned before about finding the patterns and the masking. Writing is essentially telling a story, and if anyone's taken a writing class or even any literary anything, teachers talk about the hero's journey, and that once you learn what that is, you can apply to any movie you've ever seen in your entire life almost. And so once you start seeing those patterns and start noticing tropes, so my pattern recognition really helps me create a world where not only I understand it, but then can express it to other people. I also find that I get very, what's the word? Not anal, but I get fascinated by certain beats or emotional things, or I like the structure of it especially, and how to make it make sense, or why do things make sense, and especially in regards to people's and character psychology. It's what are their behavior patterns, into what's causing this. So I think I really just enjoy the structure of it, and it's a math that I understand. Instead of numbers, you're working with people. What else? I also feel I have I can get very sensory with my writing, because especially with my newest work, I love a good metaphor and analogy, but there's a part of my show where I talk about specifically that autism is a lot like vodka. You just take shots until you get sick and puke everywhere. And I use that as a metaphor for, having a meltdown essentially.
Oh, okay.
And so I like to be able, it helps me okay, how do I explain these feelings that can seem so alien to other people? And I don't know, it's so that, and then, so just seeing things in a more sensory way, or certain details I get kind of caught up in, or I'm hey, why are we doing things like this? This doesn't make sense. And so that's where I make fun of it, or I'm genuinely asking no, why do we do this? Because it really doesn't make sense to me. So I think it just allows me to question and just dive deep in places where I think most people are either afraid to or don't bother doing so.
I've noticed the latter for sure. I mean, the world in which we live isn't really created for us, so to speak, and so it's like a giant puzzle, trying to fill in all the pieces here and there, and what makes people tick, why do they do certain things, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, especially, I don't know if you've seen The Rehearsal with Nathan Fielder.
Oh, yes.
The second season especially was so groundbreaking in that sense, because it starts with Like he's just genuinely trying to figure out like what are all the possible situations that can happen with this. And later on in the season, he does see like an autism specialist because there's this whole reason why everything ends up connecting back to autism. But he's talking to the specialist, and
I guess what you're doing in the rehearsal is so important for everyone else to know what it's like to have autism, right? A lot of times people assume that if you're autistic, you have a lot of very severe issues. But there are people who are diagnosed as autistic who are only just trying to fit in socially.
And everyone has trouble with
everyone
that.
has that. So this is what's so unique about the show is that you took it to a whole different level, you know? And I think it's really nice to highlight for the neurotypical population, hey, this person could also be autistic.
Right.
You know,
she's just like, yeah, no, it's very common with autistic people to do these things. And he's like, yeah, but I'm not autistic, you know, so.
Or it could be, they could not be autistic and just like all of us want to, you know, practice for a life situation.
Definitely also true.
I feel like it's things that because we're able to see things in a certain way.
Yeah.
People still want to like disassociate from that just because of the label, you know? So I found, even though you could say like, oh, these are universal themes, but, you know, when everyone's like, oh, everyone's a little bit autistic. Or I've even had people when I've showed them some of my work, they're like, oh, well, that's just a female experience. That's just this experience. I'm not autistic, so it has nothing to do with me.
Yep.
It's like, does it though?
Can you walk me through your creative process? How you, say, write a piece of work?
Yeah. Sometimes it's a mix of different things. I like to take things from my real life. Like, well, this show is pretty much like autobiographical, but I tell my life story through like a heightened character. I always like to up the stakes in certain things. So I'll have something happen to me. And then I'm very much that kind of person where, you know, like when you have an interaction with somebody and in your head, you just think of all these like sick comebacks you would do. But of course, like you don't say it in the moment, but you think about it like in the shower. Like that's kind of how I treat like certain topics. And then other things where like, because lately I've been getting into more like, or not even lately, but I've noticed a pattern where it's usually based on current events too. Like my last big Fringe show back in 2019 was a play that I wrote, produced, starred, and directed in. Don't act and direct in your own things. It was stressful. But that one was about a high school reunion following a school shooting. And so for me personally, like it was not based, but like influenced by like the Stoneman Douglas shooting. And that's where I went to high school. So things like that, like from, like, of course I was 5 years since I graduated then, but that was something that like personally affected me. And that was how I like got my catharsis. So usually if it's things that have affected me or, you know, like things about the state of the world where I feel like I don't know how else to express it. So I guess it's like my way of breaking things down and putting them back together again. And then also making fun of it too, because I like to find the comedy in especially tragic, twisted things.
You seem like you have a lot of comedy throughout your work. What inspired you to want to go to comedy?
I think like I've always liked things that made me laugh, but I've especially loved making people laugh. I think too, like one of the things, like I know is especially as a child, like I've always loved comedy things, but then I always would find myself, and you could argue this was also part of the mask too that I developed, where I would have people laugh at me or make fun of me, or people would think something I did was funny, but I would have no idea. And so I think I've gotten to a point where I've picked up on those specific patterns so well. I'm like, okay, how do I redo this, or how do I make this work to my advantage? So I think it was also like a defense mechanism where, oh, you already think I'm weird or annoying? Like, oh, I'll show you weird or annoying. Or it's like, oh, well, it's the easiest way I can make, you know, people like me is if I'm funny, you know, versus other things.
I've had that too. in my experience where I've used comedy or jokes as a way of deflecting certain, I guess, experiences.
And that I've definitely noticed in my, like, especially in this piece that's so me, that I have, like, especially going through the editing process, there are a lot of moments where would add jokes where I didn't need to. Like, it was part of, like, my defense mechanism where it's like, oh, I don't want to be too upset by this, but if I make fun of it, then everyone else feels better, or it's less awkward, or, you know. But I don't know. It's always something that I've been drawn to and I like doing, gives me a sense of control, and it just makes life sometimes more bearable because, you know, when people just have like a lack of better word, like stick up their butt for things like that, I don't know, life's too short to, like, even though, like, of course the state of the world is not great right now, at least what I can do is like, okay, how can I turn this around and not just exploit it for my own benefit, but at least, you know, make it bearable or find the flaws in it. Like, it helps you just see the light, more or less.
Yeah. Let's talk about your new show.
Yay.
So, My Life as an Inspirational Porn Star. And I love that double meaning of inspirational porn, of course, and what goes into that. Can you explain to me how this show came about?
Absolutely. So the first time I even heard the phrase inspirational porn, it was on a podcast called Spectrumly Speaking with like two women, autistic women talking, and they were talking about inspirational porn. And I was like, oh my God, this is genius. Like, of course that's what this is. Like, I've never had like the vocabulary to pinpoint like what that was. Because for the longest time, and the main crux of the show, or something that I struggled with really for years, is I wasn't comfortable with being out as autistic. And, you know, for years because of multiple traumas that I go into detail with the show. And a lot of times when people would ask about my perspective or that, I would get the feeling that they would want me to be a certain way with it and fall into that inspirational porn trap of like, oh, like you're autistic, but look how much you've accomplished. You've graduated college. Yeah. You're doing all of these things, like, wow. But at the same time, I'm like, this is like the bare minimum for any functioning person in society. No pun intended on the functioning part. Yeah. And, you know, I've always had these high expectations of myself and others. But it's also this dichotomy of like growing up, like adults loved me and thought I was so like precocious or like so mature and wow, like you're doing all these amazing things. And then people my age were like, who's this asshole? Like, or I don't know if I can curse on here, but like, you know, they just thought I was annoying or off or what have you. So it's like having both of these polar opposite like views of yourself. And so that created like a whole internal conflict. And especially calling myself an inspirational porn star too, like it's, you know, like you don't talk, when people talk about inspirational porn, they never talk about like who, like they say like, yeah, it's people with disabilities, but it's like a fun little twist. And I'm glad you caught that, where it's like, yes, I'm the star of this, but is it like, oh, is it my own show? You know, especially with like OnlyFans being popular, it's like, oh, well, these women, they're at least controlling their material and doing this. They're not, but it's still a version of exploitation. So I guess it's like, where do you draw the line? I tell my story as if I'm a washed up child actress, like very Norma Desmond, like Sunset Boulevard, like that archetype. Because it's like, oh, once you're 22, like you lose all your benefits and literally no one cares. And, you know, even I have a joke too, where when I was diagnosed at 2 years old, like moderate to severe, doctors didn't think I'd ever talk, let alone produce and star in my own one-woman show. But I do have a bit where I say, like, you know, despite that, they did make an effort to say how, quote, exceptionally beautiful I was.
Oh, jeez.
But it was the 90s.
Yeah.
And that's literally a whole section in my show. But that just shows you, like, even on top of, like, not just being autistic, but as a femme autistic woman, it's like a whole other layer that another whole other layer that people either like don't take as seriously you know, because of course people would see it and be like, oh, well, you're like conventionally attractive. Like, what's wrong with your life? You know, but it's a lot of preconceived notions, and these preconceived notions have hands, as that meme goes.
We got to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Hey, I hope you're enjoying this and all the quality content we offer through WUSF. We need your help, though. Like everything in an overcapitalized society, things cost money to operate, like creating all of the awesome videos and podcasts you see here. Now, I could break out the puppies and play to Sarah McLachlan, and you break down and hit donate, but I think we're bigger people here. So, if you're able and willing, please donate your dollars today by visiting wusf.org/donate to get started. Anything helps, and your money goes toward producing all of this content, supporting our community, and a whole lot more. And if enough people do this, maybe these annoying ads will go away. Puppies! Donate today.
Chapter 9. You can't spell brat without autism spectrum disorder. The Bay's silent. Bench. College was way better than high school, hands down.
So there's a lot of comedy in it, some stand-up, burlesque.
Yeah, so I'm very much inspired by, so I'm wearing like this vintage like 50s lingerie set, and I have this like, I call it like the divorce robe, like the big like fluffy robe, like, oh, my husband died, but I have the inheritance, like that kind of energy.
Cocktail in one hand, cigarette in the other.
I have a martini glass and I have like the Audrey Hepburn cigarette holder
perfect.
thing. No, it's very much that to a T. And because I'm in lingerie and do a little like like a little bit. So it's not like full on burlesque, but it has that, you know, of course, if I'm calling myself a porn star, you got to give the people what they want. So that's where that kind of comes in. So it's more of like the, not to appropriate burlesque, so to speak, but that's where like that aesthetic, like very cabaret. The main point of the show too is expressing how, like I do have stories from my childhood, of course, but a lot of it is my more adult stories. So like the first time I lost my virginity, experiences with drugs, you know, all the things that these autism moms would explode at. And so I started writing this show like 6 years ago. And so I had like the idea, like I had the same like, oh, washed up actress thing. At first I guess when I wasn't as like comfortable with myself, I thought like, oh, let me just create like a completely different character. So I initially did that like porn star name trick where it's like you take your first pet and then the street you grew up on. So originally it was like calling myself like Ginger Court, which is like high class escort level. And I wrote like a good 20 pages as this like, you know, very Norma Desmond Blanche from Streetcar Named Desire type. And then it was a very like on and off process. And so I got into like Tampa Fringe in 2020, and we can imagine what happened in 2020. And also like the Vancouver Fringe too, which was like a crazy time. But I, of course, couldn't do either of those given the pandemic. But what was funny is as I was writing it, I had this voice in my head said that said I didn't have like enough experience. Like I needed more experience to write this. And I'm like, well, that's not going to work because I have to produce this show in like 6 months. But of course, the pandemic happened, which of course was not like a great time. But, you know, I'm a big believer in divine timing and everything happens for a reason. So then it was kind of like on the back burner for a bit. And then I would be like on and off. And it was like this, like for the longest time, the script was like the albatross on my neck. Like I hated that I couldn't get it done right away.
Yeah.
Whereas with Reunion, like I had the idea, got picked for Fringe, didn't even write the script then. Then I spent 6 months writing the script, somehow got 11 actors to agree to do this with me.
Yeah.
And then it also went not just Tampa Fringe, but even then the Tampa Theatre Festival. So
nice.
And won a Social Good Award. So I'm like, okay, like so I was very much like, oh yeah, I can do this real fast and quick. But with this, it just didn't manifest like that. But honestly, I'm very grateful because I got some good stories that I did add to the script and reconciling other parts of my identity, not just the autism, but I also talk about being bisexual too. And it kind of goes like all over the place. But yeah, I definitely feel like it worked out the way it did. And that even some recent experiences, I had like this, what is it? Like not like a premonition, but I guess the realization where like, you know, when you're writing something creative or it's like yes, you're self-insert and you're writing something that happened to you, but then like the same pattern like happens in real life.
Oh, yeah.
And so that was like a very trippy moment for me where I'm like, oh no, like life is getting weird, or is it life? Is it art? Is it? So that's just another huge part of it is realizing how much truth I'm expressing through this. And I'm just very grateful and just so excited to show people finally.
You said you become more comfortable with yourself, especially through your work. Mm-hmm. What was that catalyst for allowing you to be yourself?
That's a good question. I think this sounds like such a cliche answer, but I think for the past few years, like I've been more like single than ever. So in like the play too, I talk a lot about like my first love, so to speak, was like a guy I dated in college for nearly like my 20s, and I'll be 31 in a few weeks. And I think that was also like once you're like on your own, especially. So like we broke up like during the pandemic. So it was my first time like not living with roommates, not living with my family, not living with a significant other. And it was during that time where I actually kind of, like, especially like the world was like in isolation, so to speak. But I think that was like a very important time in my life where I was actually able to unmask freely, especially when we didn't have to go into like social settings as much. And it was just like a chance for me to like really explore like who I am, what I liked, you know, like one of the creative choices I have in the show is like I wear like blue eyeshadow, which for me is like a little symbolic because like a lot of my old like childhood pictures you'll see in the show, I have blue eyeshadow on, maybe just because I'm a Y2K kid. But also too, it like I remember like putting it on one time like while I was dating him and he was like, ooh, that's a lot. Like that's, ooh. But then it was like one birthday, like my 27th birthday, where I'm like, I'm just going to put it on just because I can.
Yeah.
And even during my dress rehearsal, I'm like, why do I look so good? Like, why does this work for me so much? So even just being able to do little things like that without like someone saying like, ew, don't do that. Or, oh, no, that's too much. Or, oh, that's, you know, because that's part of the mask too, is trying to fit into what you're supposed to be or just to get by and to really have those years. And even now still, like I'm still continuing to, but there are things that I'm also trying to unravel within myself. Like things that used to serve me when it did, but it's not serving me anymore. So yeah.
Unmasking is like a lifelong process.
Absolutely.
What's been the most challenging part of creating this piece of work?
I would say, so I have a joke in the beginning how the show did take a while and I'm just difficult to work with on a one-woman show. And I think, and that's the other part too, where, you know, I find myself like, oh, when it comes to helping other people or doing things for other people, it's like, oh, well, I can't let other people down. Like other people are counting on me. But when it's something like for yourself and only for yourself and like you're the only person that can count on yourself, I notice that gets like trickier because, you know, when you're as part of the masking, you're so used to like constantly abandoning yourself. Especially, I mean, not to say like any of like the OT therapists I had or any you know, early intervention is extremely important, like for children, depending on like the methods. But, you know, there are things where it's like I grew up learning like idioms like on flashcards or like, oh, you have to learn how to do, it's like, this is the proper way of looking somebody in the eye, or, oh, you have to make sure you're stepping down the steps like 1 foot at a time, not 2, you know, all of these like little things, which yes, like help in the grand scheme of things. But at the same time, it's like subconsciously, like I'm being told like how you are is not like, we need to fix this. And, you know, but just being able to, in my own self, to say that this is my work, like the choices I'm making for myself are good because I am good. And just developing that self-trust as well as following through on yourself more than anything. Because that's the other like theme of the show that I was reconciling with is, you know, not that, you know, there have been plenty of times where I've been let down, especially like as an institution, close people in my life, things like that. But at the end of the day, like you have to follow through on yourself, whatever that means. And then so I think that was like the hardest part of like the show for me was no matter what happens, like of course I have a great team. Mackenzie has been like an amazing director. Mitch, who's my best friend and my left brain, like I said, they help me with the PowerPoint and helping me with marketing. So I have a solid team that's helping me. But at the end of the day, it's me on stage and I have to do this for myself, if that makes sense. Of course, I have my team that helps me and they're amazing. But I think it's just really trusting in myself more than anything. Like people will come to see me. People do like me. They will support.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite moment from the play?
Oh my gosh, there's a lot of really fun ones. I think like all of our favorites right now. So I do have a bit where I educate people on Nazi history because, and you may know this or may not, but I'll explain it anyway for listeners, is the terms high functioning and low functioning, they came from Dr. Hans Asperger. And, you know, Asperger syndrome is no longer in the DSM-5 because it's related to him working with the Nazis and euthanizing children that weren't high functioning enough. And so, but the way I explain it is it kind of turned into like this gag of me being, oh my God, what's her name? Lucy Liu from Charlie's Angels. Like, you know that scene where she's the professor?
Your methodologies are antiquated and weak. Your procedures of approval ensure that only the least radical ideas are rewarded.
So I'm doing that, but I have like a lab coat and like the Ray-Ban glasses, which I didn't think this through at the time, but now I'm like laughing at myself like, wow, this is even funnier because he has the same thing. But here I am with like the teaching stick, like being like, oh, you're either easy to deal with or harder to deal with. So that's just like another like joke in it of itself that I just realized that. I'm like, haha, God, I'm so funny.
So you're doing Edinburgh Fringe.
Yes.
Can you tell me how that came about?
So that was a crazy time too. So Tampa Fringe, like you can submit or apply to the festival through Eventotron. And that's where I applied to Just a Tonic. Well, that's the name of the company. And I kept seeing ads for them, you know, pop up. And so it's like, oh, that's cool. And then at my job, they were playing The Simpsons in the break room. And it's literally them in Scotland at the Edinburgh Fringe.
Oh, nice.
And so I'm like, is that a sign? Like, because I'm very woo-woo, crazy spiritual girly like that, where, I don't know, if I see like 11:11, I'm like, oh, there's hope. Something like that. So I saw that and I'm like, oh, that's crazy. And I looked at the application. I didn't even have to pay. So I was like, oh, what are the odds, you know? And so I literally just submitted a press release, which is still so crazy to think about. That's all I did. Because this was before I even finished the script. So this was like back in like, oh my God, this was back in like January, I think.
Oh, wow. January,
February, like very early this year. And I literally was with Mackenzie, my director, also roommate. Like I was literally like, should I do it? Should I do it? And she's like, yeah, just do it. And it didn't cost any money. So I'm like, what are the odds? And so I submitted it and then I just didn't think about it. And then I got the email back that they chose me. And I'm like, I was literally like, oh my God. And then I called my parents and my dad was like, oh my God, we're going to Europe. We know what we're doing this summer. So now my family, they planned a whole Euro trip around it. Wow. So that's just very exciting. But yeah, no, that'll be like 2 months after Tampa. So I'm glad that I'm doing Tampa first at least, because this is my home ground, and you know, whatever kinks or things we need to tighten up, we'll do that. But definitely feels a little 0 to 60 on my end, I'll say. But I'm very excited, and it's for 12 days straight, which I didn't realize was what they did in Edinburgh. Because they gave me like the 12 days I was performing, and I'm like, oh, do I pick these days? And they're like, no, you're performing like all of them.
All of them.
And now I understand that scene in Baby Reindeer more because I didn't catch that when I first saw it. I didn't realize it was that continuous, but no, I'm very excited.
That's a marathon.
You literally. Well, there are even shows that go on for like a month straight, like every day.
What else do you want to accomplish in 2025?
Okay.
Even though we're halfway through the year, there's still halfway to go.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so, I mean, right now I feel like I'm almost outdoing everything that I've ever wanted in a sense, but doesn't mean we can't raise the bar. My goal, especially for Edinburgh, is I want to find a producer or a touring company that will support me, because if I want the show to grow and expand, and I've been well, I don't even think it's a joke anymore, but part of like my marketing spin on it, especially since it's going to Edinburgh, be like, hey, this could be the next Fleabag. You can at least say you saw it first. So I'm not ashamed to say I have dreams that big, because I think that's the other thing too. It's like for so long I've tried to be like, oh, like, no, we got to be realistic and practical. It's like, no, screw that. Like, I'm like, these things aren't just delusions anymore. Like, I'm actually making them happen, which is honestly just a dream for any artist to say. But yeah, I want to be able to meet a producer, touring company, any wonderful people with financial backing that wants to support a up-and-coming artist, please. Something like that. Mitch and I were trying to make our own company feeling inspired, so even creating like more work. I have other ideas too on the docket, and then they also have their ideas, so not just my stuff, but supporting other artists as well. Just really hit the ground running and keep up the snowball effect that is my life right now. So I should have more concrete goals, but that's the most I can like.
I mean, those are great
ahead.
goals.
Thank
those
you.
are great goals. Yeah, I mean, life is too short. Why not have big goals and work towards them? So
Absolutely.
That's great. Where can people find you online?
You can find me on Instagram at Gabby, Gabby, CAB13. That one I use more for like marketing, like social media, especially for my show. The links for like the tickets and stuff would be in my bio as well. Yeah, I would say like Instagram is probably like the safest one. Like Facebook I have, but I'm kind of over it already.
Who uses Facebook?
My mom. Like, she's literally like, Gabby, you don't post enough on Facebook. I'm like, nobody uses Facebook. Yeah. No offense. But yeah, I mean, so Instagram is my social media of choice at the moment. I have like one TikTok, but I'm old. Let me just keep Insta. It's easy.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming in the studio today, talking
you.
with me.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, thanks for listening. Be sure to check out WUSFjazz.org to watch jazz performances, find jazz events throughout Florida, listen to curated playlists, and a whole lot more. WUSFjazz.org. Today's audio was recorded in the WUSF studio. Production assistance by Adam Darbyshire. I'm Warren Buckles, host. Studio Sessions is a product of WUSF and is sponsored by Community Foundation Tampa Bay, with support from the Palladium, the Gobia Foundation, and from you. Thank you for your support. Learn more about jazz and arts access Florida by visiting our website at WUSFjazz.org. Copyright 2025, WUSF.